Hey, Wendy, right with Wobble.
Should the Conservative Party give their top donor accused of racism his money back? Do the public want tax cuts or more spending? And should we pay asylum seekers £3,000 to go to Rwanda? This is Politics Live. Joining me soon, Conservative MP Jonathan Gullis, Labour MP Sarah Champion, Tatan Spiller from Simple Politics and Reem Ibrahim from the Institute for Economic Affairs. On the programme.
What he said here in a private conversation half a decade ago, he's apologised for. I don't think we need to spend too much time on that, but given he's made that apology.
This Tory donor is facing new racism allegations this morning. Should the party give the money back? Diane Abbott says she was frightened by Frank Hester's alleged comments. Should Keir Starmer bring her back into the Labour Party?
I would be very sad if Diane Abbott were to leave Parliament not as a member of the Labour Party, which she's been an MP for over 40 years.
This was a week ago, but has the budget improved the Conservative Party's poll ratings? And do the public actually want tax cuts or more public spending? And we'll bring you Prime Minister's questions live at noon. Well, as I said, we're hoping to be joined by Conservative MP Jonathan Gullis shortly. But let's start with this story in The Times. The headline, migrant benches. I don't know who he ended up sitting next to. Jonathan,
George Galloway.
Your reaction, was it? Another new MP elected to Rochdale. What's your reaction to Lee Anderson defecting to Reform?
Well, I'll give you an exclusive, Joe, because I've been told through certain members of the lobby that my name is one of these 9 being floated around by Reform UK.
Ah.
Absolutely not a cat's hell and chance will I be defecting. I joined the Conservative Party at 18 years old. I've been a councillor, I've been an association officer, I've been a regional chair, I've been a parliamentary candidate and now a member of Parliament. I'm not far off 36, and nearly half of my life has been dedicated to the Conservative Party cause. Sorry, I know I don't look like I'm in my 30s. I appreciate that, but for me, it takes courage of conviction and belief to sometimes stay within something like a political party where you have very different views within that and fight for what you believe in. I get very frustrated at times with some of my colleagues. I certainly would like to see certain things. You've heard me on your show, the New Conservatives, which I'm part of. We've shared our ideas of what we think we could do around immigration skills, but it takes real moral courage to stay in there and fight for what you believe in. Sarah did that during the Corbyn years, as did many other Labour MPs, including my predecessor, Ruth Smith. So I think that it is a shame. I don't think Lee had to go. I think working class values, particularly what my grandfather taught me, and he was a working class guy who was, drove lorries, served in our Marines and served overseas, keeping our nation safe. He told me, if you're clumsy, to use Lee words, or if you get something wrong, put your hand up and say sorry. Exactly. And I don't see why he couldn't have found those words on the particular specific point around Mayor Khan being allegedly controlled by Islamists, which is simply not true. And I think it's therefore a knee-jerk reaction from Lee, one I think he will come to regret. But ultimately, we will find a Conservative candidate in Ashfield, and I'll be helping all my parliamentary colleagues and all my prospective parliamentary candidates, as well as myself, to make sure we return a Conservative government. Right.
Well, I mean, interesting comments from you, and very personal too.
It's 5 to 10, and with millions of you having cast your votes, the polls are about to close.
The arguments of the campaign are over. The counting is about to start. So, let election night begin.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to our election night studio, your destination for unrivaled coverage over the next 10 hours as we discover whom you've chosen to walk through that famous door in Downing Street.
Last time round, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn led the Labour Party. We were still in the European Union and no one had heard of coronavirus.
Today, of course, the political landscape is very different and the leaders of all the main parties have changed. Sir Keir Starmer cast his vote this morning. Only 4 Labour leaders have ever been elected Prime Minister. Has he done enough to seal the deal with the British people? And can he lead Labour to its first victory in nearly 20 years?
Rishi Sunak is the 5th Tory Prime Minister in quick succession. He surprised the country with a snap election and has been fighting hard to hang on to power after the Tories' 14 years in charge. But can he cross Jeremy Vine's winning line outside number 10?
Every paving stone a parliamentary seat. You remember 2019 when Boris Johnson won all these seats and paved a path to the door of number 10. This time, can Labour turn the blue seats red and send Keir Starmer through that historic black door, or will the Conservatives hold them off?
This is the engine room of our election coverage, where we're keeping an eye on all the election centres right across the UK with an army of reporters. Fiona Bruce and Victoria Derbyshire are with the Labour and Tory leaders. And the race to deliver the first result is always fiercely contested. So we have our earliest risers on the hunt for the early declarers.
Hello, I'm in Blythe, where a recount in 2019 stopped them winning. But this time, this team is even more determined than ever. Do we think we can beat Sunderland this time?
Well, let's just see, shall we? Sunderland has won this race many, many times, and they're not giving up without a fight.
Here in London's Broadcasting House, our teams are poised, ready to gather and then verify every single result as they begin to come in. And of course, at the heart of it is Professor Sir John Curtis, who's been hard at work already all day with the exit poll team. And in just a few moments, we can legally reveal the results of all of those calculations.
That exit poll will indicate who will be heading here to the Commons, and Rita Chakrabarti will be checking all the numbers.
We're feeding all that data into the giant screen now, and in a few moments' time, I'll be able to tell you which seats are most likely to be changing hands.
If neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak win the magic 326 seats, could one of the smaller parties back them up? Ed Davey's Liberal Democrats would love to become the 3rd biggest party once again. Nigel Farage is back in frontline politics with Reform UK. And Kirsty Wark is watching the battle in Scotland.
I'm here in Glasgow, where we're expecting a night of high drama, with politicians using the results in Scotland to argue for or against independence. I'll be joined by the country's senior politicians, advisers and commentators to react to the big stories right through the night.
Ready for an avalanche of information and reaction? Our political editor, Chris Mason, is with us here in the studio.
So, we're seconds away from 10 o'clock and the exit poll, a first indication of how the night might unfold. More than 20,000 people took part on behalf of the BBC, ITV News and Sky in this first July election since 1945. 326 seats are needed to win. So, here we go.
And as Big Ben strikes 10, the exit poll is predicting a Labour landslide.
Sir Keir Starmer will become Prime Minister with a majority of around 170 seats.
The exit poll predicts that Labour will have captured 410 seats, adding 209. It suggests the Conservatives will have lost 241 MPs, landing on 131.
On to the other numbers. The Liberal Democrats up 53 on 61 seats. Reform on 13 seats. The SNP down 38 seats. According to this exit poll, on 10. Plaid Cymru are on 4, they're up 2. And the Greens are up 1 on 2.
All the pointers tonight are that Sir Keir Starmer is taking Labour back to power. Only the 5th Labour leader to win a general election. These are the first indications of what may unfold But a moment of history beckons. Chris.
Blimey, just take a look and take in those numbers. The Conservative Party, so often an election-winning machine, looks pulverised tonight, taking in those numbers. At the last general election, it was Labour that was pulverised, reduced to its smallest number of seats since 1935. At the time, there was talk that Boris Johnson might serve as Prime Minister into the 2030s, and that for Labour to win by just a smidgen would require a Himalayan climb on their part. And yet you look at those numbers and they have won by a mile. What does this tell you? It tells us a lot about voter volatility. Like never before, more people in more places more often are more willing to change their minds about who they support from one election to another. That's why it looks like we went from a landslide last time for the Conservatives to a landslide for Labour this time. It is going to be quite the night.
To us. Very clearly. Thank you.
So, Suella Braverman, former Home Secretary there, making it clear that she believes the Conservatives have let people down. Let's hear the Basildon result.
Stewart, the Green Party, 3,133.
OK. Dreadful sound there, Basildon. It's only up the road. I should just say that the Green Party have taken Bristol Central. They took the council in the local elections. They've taken Bristol Central, and we're now going to go to Ian Duncan Smith. I think we're just lining him up. But while he's being lined up, Thangam Debonair, the Shadow Culture Secretary for Labour, loses her seat there. So let's now go to Ian Duncan Smith. Chingford, hello to you. Thanks for being with us, and sorry to keep you waiting. You were successful, no question about that, but you needed the help of an independent candidate splitting the vote in order to get through. We're going to show you what we think is going to be happening with the BBC forecast, which is a Labour landslide. And that's what we're suggesting. Labour on 410 seats. And Keir Starmer would, of course, be Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak would be, and the Conservatives would be on 144. That's the BBC forecast now. The Liberal Democrats, it would be a good night for them if this is borne out, 58 seats. And the SNP, just talking to Alex Salmond there, 8 seats at the moment. And what time is it? It is just before 4:30 and the sun is beginning to rise. There it is, just beginning to rise on what is going to be a new dawn for British politics and what is very, very likely to be a whopping Labour majority and a new Prime Minister in Sir Keir Starmer. What will this country look like in 2-3 years' time?
I think it's time for swingometer. Jeremy.
When in doubt,
let me
have
do
the
that.
swingometer.
All right. Well, so
on stage. Now, it would be extraordinary, and the first time in history, if he were to lose his seat. It's an incredibly safe seat, Richmond in a beautiful part of North Yorkshire. It doesn't seem likely that that will happen, and yet he must have on his mind parts of the country well beyond his constituency, because as things stand, he's leading his Conservatives
can I get your
to
attention,
their worst
please?
defeat
I,
for
Barry
many
Carr,
decades.
being the Deputy Acting Returning Officer for the election of a Member of Parliament for the Richmond and Northallerton constituency held yesterday, Thursday the 4th of July 2024, do hereby give notice that the number of valid ballot papers for each candidate was as follows. Jason Barnett, Independent, 27. Daniel George Callaghan, Liberal Democrats, 4,322. Angela Eileen Campion, commonly known as Angie Campion, Independent, 33. Louise Ann Dickens, Workers' Party of Britain, 90. Kevin Foster, the Green Party, 2,058. Rio Sebastian Justin Goldhammer, commonly known as Rio Goldhammer, Yorkshire Party, 132. Jonathan David Harvey, commonly known as Count Binface Party, 308. Graham Nichols, commonly known as Sir Archibald Stanton, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 99. Nicholas Omolana, commonly known as Nico Omolana, 160. Brian Neil Richmond, Independent, 222. Rishi Sunak, Conservative Party, 23,059. Lee Martin Taylor, Reform UK, 7,142. Thomas James Wilson, commonly known as Tom Wilson, Labour Party, 10,874. I hereby declare that Rishi Sunak is duly elected. Congratulations, and we address
So, the Prime Minister for now, Rishi Sunak, holds his seat in North Yorkshire quite clearly. What's happened at the same time is Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, has held his seat too in Surrey, but we're going to give you Rishi Sunak on the stage.
The returning officer and all the team who've been working here at the count and at the polling stations today. You make our democracy possible. I'd also like to thank the police who have ensured that we can conduct this ballot here in North Yorkshire, but also across the country in safety. On this difficult night, I'd like to express my gratitude to the people of the Richmond and Northallerton constituency for your continued support. Since I moved here a decade ago, you have made me and my family feel so at home, and I look forward to continuing to serve as your Member of Parliament. It is an enormous privilege. I'm grateful to my agent and constituency team, and I congratulate my opponents here on the energetic and very good-natured campaigns that they have run. The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called Sir Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory. Today, power will change hands in a peaceful and orderly manner, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence in our country's stability and future. The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss. To the many good, hard-working Conservative candidates who lost tonight, despite their tireless efforts, their local records of delivery, and their dedication to their communities, I am sorry. I will now head down to London, where I will say more about tonight's result before I leave the job of Prime Minister, to which I have given my all. I will then return here, to my family's home, and I look forward to spending more time with you all in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Thank you.
Well, an extraordinary admission on the stage from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. He has just told the country, rather than wait for the results to come in, that Labour will form the next government. He says he's called Sir Keir Starmer to concede, to congratulate Labour on winning this general election. So, from the words of the losing Prime Minister leaving his count there, Labour has won this general election. And with Rishi Sunak giving the verdict that it will be Sir Keir Starmer who will walk into Downing Street tomorrow as only the 7th Labour Prime Minister in history, only the 5th Labour leader to win a general election. So, the son of a toolmaker, as he's told us so often in the campaign, MP since 2015, Labour lawyer, now will become the next Prime Minister, according to the man who technically is the Prime Minister. I've never seen anything like it before, a concession and a congratulation.
He will be heading straight to the King at some point tomorrow to tender very quickly,
because time is against us. The Scottish Parliament elections are 18 months to 2 years away, and we need to be in a position
Okay,
where
we're going to cut in there. We've got a declaration in North Somerset. Sorry about that.
Jacob William Rees-Mogg, Conservative Party candidate, 15,420. Dina Romero, Liberal Democrats, 3,878. So the total number of valid ballot papers was 51,125. There were 142 rejected ballot papers, and I hereby declare that Dan Norris is duly elected to serve as the Member of Parliament for the North East Somerset and Hanham constituency.
Okay, Jacob Rees-Mogg losing his seat there, and it is coming up to 5 o'clock in the morning on this, the 5th of July. And we can now say with certainty that Labour have won the 2024 general election. As I speak, they have gained 326 seats. It's now 327. The size of the majority is still to be determined as the results continue to come in. But what a moment this is for Labour.
And there is Sir Keir Starmer, who will become Britain's 58th Prime Minister. He's speaking in central London. He's the only 5th Labour Prime Minister ever to win a general election. A man who often presents a serious demeanour in public. But look at that grin from ear to ear. The supporters behind him cheer. The Union flag and the Saltire, look, they are being flown behind him as Labour has racked up seats in Scotland. Let's listen in to the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
We did it! You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
Through certain members of the lobby that my name is one of these 9 being floated around by Reform UK. Absolutely not a cat's hell and chance will I be defecting. I joined the Conservative Party.
Former deputy chair of the party, part-time talk presenter, Jonathan Gullis, sitting very close to the camera. You look like you're in prison. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you, Jeremy. How are you this morning?
I can't believe, Gullis, after our friendship and all I've done for you, that I've had to eke out some interview at 9:15. What about the exclusive with me on Monday? What was the matter with you, man? The BBC?
Oh, look, Jeremy, it was important that I spoke to local and regional press and, more importantly, local members, and I have done that. In fact, I'm meeting later today the chairman of the Stoke-on-Trent North Reform UK branch because, you know, I meant it when I said it. I'm here to ingratiate myself amongst the members, show that I'm here for the right reasons, which is by pounding the pavements, delivering leaflets, knocking on doors, and convincing as many voters as possible to vote for Reform UK across the country in order to make sure that we install Nigel Farage in 10 Downing Street and have a Reform government at the next general election.
So does that mean you're going to stand as the Reform MP in Stoke, your old constituency?
I genuinely haven't made a decision on that, Jeremy. I'll be very serious. Baby 3 is imminently due any moment now. So I'm a father with a very young family. And that's a decision I would need.
Baby number 3?
Baby number 3, indeed, yeah. And that's a decision I would have to make with my wife, obviously. Understandably, she knows the sacrifices that go into it. But more importantly, Jeremy, just because I'm a former Member of Parliament, a Conservative Member of Parliament, doesn't give me some God-given right to be allowed to stand again. I believe that if I had an interest in running, it should be local Reform UK members who decide. And if I was honoured to be selected by them, I would obviously grasp the opportunity with both hands. But if they didn't, that's their democratic right too.
I love what you've been trained over the last 2 days. I'll do it if the wife says, I'll do it if the members. Now, my question would be this. On the basis that the Financial Times said this morning that Farage tells Reform donors he expects a tie-up with the Tories at the next election, and your devoted leader, Nigel, tweeted saying this is rubbish. Richard Tice came on and said it's fake news. Other people are saying not so sure. If there's any ounce of truth, why the hell did you bother 72 hours ago? Do you believe genuinely there'll be a tie-up?
No, I don't. And I believe that, no, first of all, Nigel in 2019 took a stance in the nation's interest by standing down lots of Brexit Party candidates. He took a lot of personal damage for doing that, but I think it was at that moment in time in the national interest. But look at how Nigel was treated, and more importantly, look at how Nigel was portrayed. Where was the bonfire regulations that we've still got from the European Union? Where was the real drive to try and create a more equal society by levelling up the slogan that ended up just being pots of money occasionally thrown around, but no serious demographic change? Where was the control of our borders, where we saw under the Conservatives net migration hit almost 1 million in a single year? At the end of the day, Nigel Farage did the honourable thing, was treated poorly, saw the Conservatives do the opposite to what they promised in that 2019 election manifesto. And quite frankly, when Reform UK is riding around 30% in most opinion polls, and the Conservatives barely able to get out of the teens, maybe at best 20%, where's the incentive for a deal to be done? It also treats voters with contempt. The idea that you can tell voters, oh, look, we're going to stand aside here, please lend your vote over there. Voters aren't stupid, and voters won't be gerrymandered. Voters want a real alternative, a fresh stance and change. And that's not just happening in this country. Look at parts of mainland Europe, where parties that have very recently been conceived are taking leadership roles or indeed winning elections because the people were sick of the established parties who made all the promises under the sun and failed to deliver.
The Conservatives, says Rachel, totally let the public down at the end of the last government. The way they all carried on infighting was disgraceful. Why does it? Yeah, the likes of Rees-Mogg sat there week in, week out, grinning and smirking like it was all a bit of fun, summed it up for me. I will never vote for the Tories again. Phil in Nottingham. The reason I will never vote Conservative again is that the politicians betrayed us over those 14 years and they're still in the party. The front bench may have changed, but as Labour have proven, you can't achieve anything without the support of the backbench, and there are too many Liberals inside the Tory party. You and I are mates and we've talked about this. So many people, JG, will say to me that those true Conservative values of low taxation, military, borders, policemen and women actually on the streets were lost as the Tories went to the centre, and it no longer works to say reform is far right. The truth is, somebody said it to me this morning, is it not fair to say that actually the majority, if not all of the people that vote reform and are part of reform, were disillusioned or are disillusioned Tories? The Tories have changed, not the people who are voting for reform.
Exactly. I left the Conservative Party because I could not honestly look a voter in the face and say, hand on heart, I would trust the Conservatives to deliver on the promises that they've started to make. Let's look at the European Convention of Human Rights. I put down a bill to leave the ECHR in 2022-23. And what happened? There are sitting Conservative MPs who voted against that bill alongside Sir Keir Starmer and others who frankly didn't have the guts to vote for it. Now I'm suddenly meant to believe that if they were in charge, they would vote for something so fundamental. The same Conservative Party that said that they were going to be a low tax, yet the tax burden went to the highest on record. The same Conservative Party that said that they were going to deregulate from the EU and take on the European Union, yet we did a deal where we agreed under the Windsor Framework, something I rebelled on, to essentially remain aligned to many of the EU's rules and regulations in order to try and prioritise a relationship there, rather than actually try and become the global trading power that we should have done.
I know personally how much you've grappled with this. How difficult? Do you feel liberated? Do you feel people? How did the Conservative Party respond? How do you feel 2 days on, genuinely?
Well, on the day, Jeremy, I felt sad because I've been a member of the Conservative Party my entire adult life. This was not an easy decision that I made, and I really did, as you say, take my time to think about it because I had to do what I thought was right. And at the end of the day, I felt that, as I say, I could never look a voter in the face and honestly say the Conservative Party would truly deliver on the promises. They talk tough now on net zero, yet some of those same ministers were the ones pushing forward with net zero regulations that's choking the life out the ceramic sector of Stoke-on-Trent, seeing jobs go abroad, potteries factories shutting, and all they were offering were little bits of help with electric when it's a gas energy powered industry. You know, it just used to drive me batty, and I'm quite frankly very disappointed. But what I will say is I've had many Conservative members and some sitting Conservative MPs send me very sweet messages, totally understanding my reasoning and my logic for why I've gone, even if they personally don't fully agree with it. And I just want to say thank you to those people, many of whom I didn't expect to necessarily reach out, because I think it does show that there is a lot of grappling within the Conservative Party membership still about where they think the future lies. I firmly believe the future lies in a fresh new phase, which is Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, who has been consistent in his convictions of his beliefs for decades, which is extremely rare in British politics, and that should give people hope that under a Nigel Farage-led United Kingdom, he would do exactly what he says and not spend his time trying to water things down to appease certain members of the backbenches, which I promise voters will happen in the Conservative Party government.
Listen, great to have you on, mate. You'll be back on here soon. We wish you luck, and I know how much you've grappled. I personally think you've made the right decision. Good to have you on. Listen, great. JG, Jonathan Gullis.
Never trust a Tory. Did you get that? I'll repeat it. Never trust a Tory. They will always let you down. They will always betray you.
Great with Wobble.
Donald Trump finally gets his Peace Prize from the world of football. But how does that fit with his military threats to Venezuela? And the actor Timothy Spall stars in a new festive film about dying. But he tells us why he thinks this is actually the season to be silly. Good evening, it's Matt Chorley with your Friday News Night, live from Broadcasting House, bringing you insight and interviews on the big political and world stories. None bigger tonight than the glittering World Cup draw in Washington, D.C. Hello. We carried out the draw for tonight's show earlier using a complicated system of ping-pong balls, goldfish bowls and a Village People CD. On our panel tonight, we've got the left wing and the right wing covered, and they're all top strikers. Kieran Stacey is policy editor for The Guardian, Dia Chakravarti is a columnist at The Telegraph, and Paul McNamee is the editor of The Big Issue. They're all limbering up on the touchline, ready for action. But first, let's go to America, where Donald Trump received the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize, was handed a certificate and a medal in a ceremony that also did the jaws for 48 teams taking part in the men's 2026 FIFA World Cup, which is technically being hosted by Mexico and Canada alongside the US. So you'd be forgiven for not realising this wasn't just the Trump show. Here's what they said.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is your prize. This is your Peace Prize. There is also a beautiful medal for you that you can wear everywhere you want to go.
I'm going to wear it right now.
Okay. Let me hold. Fantastic. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much. This is truly one of the great honors of my life. And beyond awards, Johnny and I were discussing this. We saved millions and millions of lives. And I think you're going to have an event the likes of which maybe the world has never seen. Based on the enthusiasm that I've seen, I have never seen anything like it. We've had a tremendous relationship, working relationship with Canada. We have our Prime Minister of Canada there, and we have our President of Mexico.
Well, we're joined now by Mike Gonzalez, a foreign policy senior fellow from the Heritage Foundation, a think tank which advises the Trump administration. Good evening to you.
Hi, thanks a lot for having me on. It's a great honour.
Why do you think that Gianni Infantino has invented this FIFA Peace Prize and decided to give it for the first time to Donald Trump?
Well, Infantini, I think, was very wise to present Trump with the award because it obviously pleased Trump. Look, Trump has settled. First of all, he got the ceasefire in Gaza, which is a very big thing. He's working on getting something similar in Ukraine, although that seems to be harder. He's working on several fronts. He's actually somebody who doesn't like war that much. So I don't really have a problem with Infantini giving Trump this award.
Is there something a bit strange about him getting this award at the precise time that his defence secretary is accused of authorising illegal executions in the Caribbean?
Well, that has not been proven. That is about to be investigated. A lot of that, it looks like the Washington Post is virtually alone with that story that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, ordered a second tap. It looks like he was actually out of the room. Even the New York Times is questioning whether Hegseth was in the room at all. So I'm not a JAG officer. I'm not a lawyer. But I think this story is unraveling very quickly.
Is there something a bit strange about the fact that the head of FIFA has met Donald Trump more than any other world leader? What is going on there? It's a strange relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, it looks like Infantini likes Trump and vice versa. Trump does well in that kind of international environment. I don't think the U.S. is about to host. I mean, there's going to be 16 cities, but 11 of them will be American. The rest will be in Canada and in Mexico. I don't think it's that strange at all that Gianni Infantini, the president of FIFA, would be in a close relationship with President Trump, given that the World Cup is going to take place here.
Give us a sense of, I don't know if you're a fan of soccer. Is America excited about hosting the World Cup?
I think soccer, football, as you call it, is catching on. I think my children, for example, are fans of Tottenham. One of my sons is a big fan of Tottenham, the Spurs in London, and Real Madrid as well. I think that what is strange is that American kids are following European soccer a lot more than they're following American soccer. We do have an American league, just so nobody really goes to their games. People watch, they're able to watch now Premier League, La Liga, from Europe. The broadcasts are on every weekend. We have about maybe 3 or 4 games every Sunday, or Saturday, sorry.
Well, we'll see if it all catches on. Good to speak to you tonight. Mike Gonzalez there from the Heritage Foundation. I'm joined now by very much our UK end of the panel. Is this a serious award? Kieran, are you looking forward to it being awarded in future years, the FIFA Peace Prize?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, not least because one of the people on the committee advising who it should go to next time is a business person with connections to the military dictatorship in Myanmar. So I think, you can expect a lot of very peaceful people to get this in the future. Look, it's a peace prize invented to give to Donald Trump, and they gave it to Donald Trump. Actually, it's not a bad piece of diplomacy on Gianni Infantino's part, is my bet. If you want to tie the president in with this World Cup to a sport that he probably doesn't know much about, doesn't necessarily care much about, that could possibly trigger some kind of diplomatic problems. You mentioned that Canada and Mexico are also co-hosting. That brings all sorts of other problems. Giving him a little bauble, telling him, here's a medal to wear around your neck. You can wear it around any time you like. That might not actually be that bad an idea.
Is he a worthy recipient of a Peace Prize, dear?
I think it's always subjective, isn't it? I was just thinking about the previous recipients of various much more esteemed, much greater esteemed peace prizes. A lot of people, if the Gaza deal works, for a lot of people, he would have brought peace. And for that region, it is a really important step. Whoever's bringing it, what the method is and what his motivations are almost irrelevant if you can bring peace. I always, because I grew up in Bangladesh, that's where I'm from, and Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. We heard a lot about this because in 1971 is when Bangladesh was liberated from Pakistan. There was a genocide happening against Bangladeshi people. Kissinger was seen responsible for that, or partly at least, and then he went on to win the 1973 Nobel Peace Prize. So the only thing I've taken from all of this is that a peace prize isn't for life. You know, it's very subjective, and you may be worthy of it in a moment in time for some people, but not for others.
Paul, what do you think?
I am just glad that young fella has finally got some recognition, because you never really hear anything about Trump. And at last, on the world stage, we got it. I think it is a laughable little trinket to give to him. But I think Kieran has a point that perhaps this is a way of bringing him on side, even though, as you pointed out, he can't stop having meetings with Infantino. But it means then perhaps he'll be pacified during the competition. He'll feel invested in it somehow. He maybe will allow some of the teams that might have problems getting in because of the stricter rules that America is bringing through, like Iran. They may find it easier to get in for the tournament. Who knows? At the very least, it means that somebody who needs to be treated like a big child, it seems, on the global stage, has been treated that way. Even when he was putting on the medal, it was like a kid at primary school going, well done you for showing up.
Well, he said something which might actually go down better in the UK than in the US. Let's take a look at a clip. This is Donald Trump's suggestion to rename American football.
When you look at what has happened to football in the United States, again, soccer in the United States, we seem to never call it that because we have a little bit of a conflict with another thing that's called football. But when you think about it, shouldn't it really be called? I mean, this is football. There's no question about it. We have to come up with another name for this. It really doesn't make sense when you think about it. It's really football.
What do we think?
That's the most popular thing he's ever said, isn't it?
Well, here, I suspect that American football fans might take a different view.
I mean, if that ends up happening, that would be an absolute coup for the UK to make that happen. I think it was Rio Ferdinand who was up there on stage with him saying, Mr. President, you've really got to stop calling it soccer, you've got to start calling it football. The thing is with Trump, I mean, I spent 4 years in Washington reporting on him at close quarters. He actually, he really likes being liked. You know, for all of his bombast, for all of his bluster, for all of his willingness to make enemies, he really likes to be liked. And, you know, presented with a shiny trophy and, you know, hundreds of people in the audience and cameras beaming his image to the rest of the world, he will often just play to the gallery. And you know, and you saw that a little bit with Zoran Mamdani, you know, when he came to the White House, the New York mayor. Having previously called him, a communist, he's suddenly there in his all charm and his, you know.
Indeed, we've even seen this with Keir Starmer.
Yes,
you know,
I was just
there are different
about
approaches you can take, and actually going all in does seem to get some results.
Yes, and there were lots of speculations, weren't there? You know, how is he going to react to Keir Starmer? Politics very different, etc., etc. But I think when you looked at them, they had a much better chemistry, if you like, than him and Theresa May, for example. You know, where the politics might have been a little bit more similar. So yes, I think you're right that it's very sort of personal with Trump. He has this sort of charm, who goes on this charm offensive if you give it back to him.
It needs to be two-way. What do you think, Paul? Is it worth the price? I don't know how much the trophy cost.
I think it's definitely worth it. I mean, it might not be worth the ticket price to all the matches, considering how expensive they are for fans to get into it. But at least this, as a start, for a very, 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 very long draw, it brought something positive from Trump.
Yeah, there was good reason to sit through all of that balls business. Right, well, on the subject of football, let's come back to UK politics. Nigel Farage has apparently spent the day signing Reform UK football shirts, while also posting online about racism in the BBC. It follows a fortnight of him facing allegations about what he did or did not say at school half a century ago.
I have never directly really tried to go and hurt anybody.
You're opening the door there to perhaps you did it without meaning to offend.
Have I said things 50 years ago that you could interpret as being banter in a playground? You could interpret it in the modern light of day in some sort of way, yes. But isn't it funny?
Okay, so you did say stuff to these people then?
I've never directly racially abused anybody, no. Well, I did not say those things to that individual categorically. And as for other people coming out and saying things, well, we've been having a look today. I mean, one of them was the leader of Kent County Council until he was deposed this year. Another is leader of the Lib Dems on Salisbury Council.
I can categorically say that the stories being told about me from 50 years ago are not true. That's a statement from Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK tonight, on claims he racially abused fellow school pupils 5 decades ago, saying things like Hitler was right and gas 'em to a Jewish student.
The double standards and hypocrisy of the BBC are absolutely astonishing. At the time I was alleged to have made these remarks, one of your most popular weekly shows was the Black and White Minstrels, right? The BBC were very happy to use blackface. Oh, and not just in the Black and White Minstrels, you did it in It Ain't Half Hot Mum as well. I cannot put up with the double standards of the BBC about what I'm alleged to have said 49 years ago and what you were putting out on mainstream content. So I want an apology from the BBC for virtually everything you did throughout the 1970s and 80s.
Kieran, I'm interested in, because you follow these sorts of stories, different political leaders having to defend themselves and different things.
Yeah.
It's a story that, for whatever reason, he can't put a lid on.
No.
And why is that? Why won't this story go away?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is the sheer number of people who are coming forward. The Guardian has now spoken to 28 people, some on the record, some off the record. There's another man tonight, Yinka Bankole, who's just gone on the record. We've spoken to him off the record before, but he's now gone on the record about racist abuse that Farage directed his way, telling him when he met him, that's the way back to Africa. I think the sheer weight of evidence is so strong that it's difficult for him just to dismiss it. I also think it's interesting watching Nigel Farage's response to this evolve over time. As you saw with those clips, he started off by saying, this was all 50 years ago, people can't remember what was said. But as other people have started to ask about it, as BBC interviewers, as we saw, have followed up on it, as other newspapers have followed up, he's realised this isn't just going to be something he can dismiss easily. He can't just do his normal line when the Guardian reports on reform and just say, oh, it's the left-wing Guardian. He's actually got to take this a bit more seriously. One option would be for him to come out and go, you know what, I did say some awful things. I was a different person back then, but, I've changed now and this is why I've changed. It's really interesting to me that he can't bring himself to say that. Maybe that's just because the amount of things that he said and the tone of it is so heinous that he can't quite,
We should obviously say that he, on some of the specific allegations, he has denied saying those specific things. Dear, where were you on this? He says it's a long time ago. It was a different time. Is that a defence?
I mean, if it was nearly 50 years ago. So I think it is the danger for, not so much for The Guardian, because we all know where The Guardian's coming from, and that's absolutely fine. People, newspapers, Guardian and mine, we have a sort of a line. I think it's trickier for the BBC, because if you push too much, or if you go really hard on this story, you do risk people thinking that it's the media, the BBC, the taxpayer-funded media, which decides which politician gets away with saying what at what point of their lives. Because if Labour pushes too much on it, I think Nigel Farage's supporters would be right to remind Labour Party that one Sadiq Khan, whilst being Communities Minister, went on the Iran regime's press TV and called fellow Muslims who he thought might be more integrated or whatever, Uncle Toms. As a Communities Minister, as a politician, going on Iran's press TV. And then he regretted it, as they all do.
He said it in 2009, apologised in 2016.
But the point is, you do have a point where you think, is the media deciding who gets away with it? Justin Trudeau, he said he can't even remember how many times he's put on black faces once he was 29 years old, not a schoolboy, So there is this danger that reform voters or potential reform voters think, is this time to move on? Have you decided this is what Nigel Farage is like, and you'll throw anything at him to see if it sticks?
Paul,
I'm not sure that's the case. I think that there's something more fundamental here. Even if you make an argument that that was some time ago, that doesn't matter. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I'm not quite as old as Farage, but I knew what was right and wrong, and what was right to say and what was not right to say. And if he was saying it anyway, I think using time as an excuse isn't an excuse. And the second thing is, if he doesn't come out and either clear this up, admit it, or say that he has learned from it, or do something that gets hold of it, every time he says something, this will come up and be referred back to it. There was the story this week. There were some figures about primary school pupils in Glasgow, and the figures, the bold top line figures, were a third didn't speak English as a first language. Now, if you went underneath it, a lot of them were fluent, even though English wasn't their first language. So it was something there that could be manipulated, and Farage manipulated it, and it felt like it was from a racist agenda. And he was called out by both Swinney and Starmer for it. But his problem is, if he doesn't fix this, every time he says it, it's going to look like he's saying something racist.
And what about him attacking the BBC? I mean, that will play with some of his supporters, will it, Kieran?
I think it plays with a minority of his supporters, actually. I'm not sure that kind of very out there Trumpy type response plays that well in the UK. And if you look at trust in media organisations, it's very different in this country from what it is in the US. So actually the BBC is enormously trusted by British voters in a way that maybe the New York Times or the equivalent outlets in the US aren't trusted. So Trump can get away with attacking the media, I think, in a way that Farage can't. And also I'd say one of Farage's key appeals to the public is that he brushes things off. He's quite, he doesn't let things get to him. He's funny. He looks like he's enjoying himself most of the time. If he's there on camera kind of ranting at a BBC reporter, I think that just goes down badly in multiple ways. Can I just say one other thing, which is about what Dia said, is that The Guardian has its view and the Telegraph has its view. That might be true on the opinion pages, but I am sure that the Telegraph would have published the same investigation that we've published, because the amount, as I've said, the amount of evidence here is so overwhelming, and the things that are alleged to have been said are so out there. I think it's enormously in the public interest. It's just a great piece of investigative journalism.
Oh, absolutely. No, don't get me wrong. Report, absolutely. I am only talking about the opinion pages.
Fair enough.
I want to ask you about this idea of who can beat Nigel Farage, because obviously he's still ahead in the polls. There's a new poll in the Times tonight of Labour members looking at who might be popular to replace Keir Starmer. Ed Miliband, Wes Streeting and Lucy Powell all come out quite well. But they were asked the two most important qualities for any leader. 48% say competence, 39% then say the ability to beat Reform UK. Almost double those who said it was important for a leader to share their values. So it's the Labour members, Paul, seem to be identifying beating Farage as a pretty important factor when deciding who they might go for.
And I think...
obviously with the proviso that Keir Starmer is still Prime Minister and still leader.
Yeah, he is, and it looks like he will be until May, and we'll see what happens in Scotland, Wales and the local elections in May. But I think that this is part of the damaging aspect of the political system that we have. That today, for instance, Labour Party, they brought out their child poverty strategy. I think it could have gone further, but it's a good, positive piece of a way forward to deal with an endemic problem that affects 4.5 million children. But that doesn't matter as much as, well, can he nudge Farage out of the way? So it just comes back to whether somebody is engaging enough in the media rather than what they're doing. Like Ramsay MacDonald had that incremental politics thing. Perhaps that's kind of where Starmer is, but that doesn't seem to matter.
One other thing, dear, before we move on, there's YouGov polling that shows the proportion who say Kemi Badenoch is doing well has doubled since October, from 15 to 30%. Is there something going on with Kemi Badenoch? How worried should Nigel Farage be about that?
I think Kemi Badenoch is seeming a lot more comfortable in her skin. I think people from both sides of the political divide have agreed that in the more recent PMQs, at least, she's looking confident. She's doing well. There's a new term. I don't know whether you were aware. My esteemed colleague Charles Moore has come up with the term Keminism.
Keminism?
Yes.
You heard it here first.
Well,
and
you
possibly
should read
last.
You should. Don't be like that. I have to say, I ran it past some people at Mrs. Badenoch's office. They're not quite sure about being called Keminists. But what I'm trying to say, I suppose, is that last year, this time, when I was speaking to a lot of Tory donors, there was very much this sense of anger. We're not going back to the Conservatives. No, we want nothing to do with them. 14 squandered years. We've had enough. Let's look at reform. That anger, I think, is subsiding a little bit.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me loud and clear? Great. Well, it's been a pretty extraordinary week in British politics, and some might say pretty extraordinary day in British politics. Today's the day we learn that there will be surveillance cameras, not just in our big cities, but literally in every single village. The surveillance state is getting very, very close indeed. And that, of course, in the same week that we learn that the 800-year right to trial by jury is to be abolished in the majority of cases. And by the way, the argument that magistrates deal with many of the minor cases, well, think about it, 3 magistrates actually form a mini jury of their own. And of course, despite not being in the manifesto, the government want to introduce digital ID, leaving literally every single one of us in this country open to hackers. And it is, frankly, a very authoritarian government. It doesn't really believe in liberty. It doesn't really believe in individual freedom. And we learned, and it began last year, it doesn't really believe in democracy either. The decision last year for 7 of the county council elections not to go ahead on May the 1st bore no logic at all. How is it logical that Kent went ahead, but just across the river, Essex didn't? It made no sense at all. Now, I know one of the reasons for it, of course, was the Conservative leaders of those councils were urging the government not for the elections to go ahead because they wanted to stay in place. Well, we had been promised mayoral elections this year, and I spoke to a senior member of an Essex council this morning who told me word for word, the councils are ready for these elections and we have spent millions across the county of Essex alone in preparation. Now, the fact that we've been told that the county council elections will go ahead just 1 year late is a good thing, not a bad thing. But the fact that these mayoral contests are to be postponed for a further 2 years is monstrous, given firstly that the electorate were told they would go ahead, given the amount of money that's been spent in preparing for them. But there's another factor I think we should consider. My voters in Clacton will now be expected and asked to vote in 2026, in 2027, and in 2028. Forgive me, but they might be getting slightly confused as to what's going on in local government. Well, it is a local government reorganisation. I have to say, it's one personally that I'm completely opposed to. The concept of out on the end of Essex, Tangerine District Council, which at least people do bear some sense of belonging to, identity with, allegiance to, will get replaced by some amorphous mass of a unitary, is not something that I approve of or believe in at all. But I have to accept there's nothing we can do to stop it. But the other reason why these mayoral elections should go ahead is we're going to need an elected figure in local politics to actually explain to people why they're being asked to vote year after year after year. So you really could say to yourself, there is absolutely no reason why these elections should not go ahead. But then there is, of course, one very big reason why these elections should not go ahead, and there's no prizes for guessing, but it is an electoral calculus put out their figures just a couple of hours ago that Reform would have won all 4 of these contests and would have won them quite comfortably. The government are basically committing electoral fraud upon the electorate who had every opportunity to put Reform mayors in place. Those elections would have been under first past the post. Nothing really could have changed that. By the time 2028 comes along, it'll be AV or some other system which the government think will disfavour the prospects of a Reform win. You believe it or not believe it, the Guido Fawkes website say they've seen a briefing that the government wishes to make sure that Reform can't win more than one mayoral contest every year. So what is happening is wrong. However, our adopted mayoral candidates, Peter Harris, Rear Admiral Parry, David Bick and Paul Lynham, they will stay in place. They will be our candidates in 2028, and they will now lead our county council campaigns in those areas. I don't think the government can now cancel those county council elections. They said only in exceptional circumstances, but I think that probably would mean there has been a sort of declaration, perhaps, of another pandemic. So we are annoyed, we are angry at what happened last year, and it just shows the total and utter disdain this country has for liberty, democracy, freedom in this country, and everything that we have held dear. I have to say, personally, I increasingly hold the individuals that run this government with absolute and total contempt. So today is not a complete loss for us, and I suspect that this time yesterday we might have seen an attempt to postpone the county council elections for a further year, but perhaps they've realised just what a level of uproar and outrage that might have caused. We did last year launch a petition on this, which gained hundreds of thousands of votes, and we've launched that petition again today. Interestingly, the Conservative Party are now adopting exactly the same slogan as us, using the same font size on their social media, and pretending that they too are champions of democracy when it's their very own council leaders last year and this year urging for the elections not to go ahead. So we will fight the county elections, our mayoral candidates will stay in place, and we will, whatever the system, go ahead and win those council elections next year. Now, I know that there'll be a variety of questions, because reform does seem to be in the news quite a lot lately. So this is a good opportunity to ask pretty much whatever you want. It's open season. I'm on my Jack Jones, so here we go. Let's start with Damien Grammaticus from the BBC.
Can I just ask, you said open season about anything. Can I ask just about something different?
So, yes, of course you can. My dear fellow, I would expect nothing less from our favourite national broadcaster.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. This morning, Richard Tice said on the radio, he was asked about the comments made by schoolmates of yours who have said that comments you made they viewed as racist and offensive. He said that they were lying. You have said before that you did make comments. It may have been banter, it wasn't directly racially abusing anyone. So Richard Tice is wrong, isn't he?
I thought this morning's performance by one of your lower grade presenters on the Today programme was utterly disgraceful. I think to frame a question around the leader of Reform's relationship with Hitler, which is how she framed it, was despicable, disgusting, beyond belief. Are you surprised that 500,000 people every year refuse to pay the licence fee? But let me say this to you. The double standards and hypocrisy of the BBC are absolutely astonishing. At the time I was alleged to have made these remarks, one of your most popular weekly shows was the Black and White Minstrels, right? The BBC were very happy to use blackface. Oh, and not just in the Black and White Minstrels, you did it in It Ain't Half Hot Mum as well. And what about Alf Garnett? Do you remember what he called Marigold? Do you remember the word he used to describe Marigold on not live, but on primetime national TV? I better not repeat the word, otherwise you'll all use it and say that I used it. Homophobia? It ain't half hot, Mum? Are you being served? Oh, and what about Bernard Manning? Perfectly happy at exactly the same time for Bernard Manning to appear on primetime national BBC comedy, telling jokes for which these days you'd probably get a knock at the door from our thought police and perhaps get a 31-month prison sentence. I cannot put up with the double standards of the BBC about what I'm alleged to have said 49 years ago and what you were putting out on mainstream content. So I want an apology from the BBC for virtually everything you did throughout the 1970s and 80s. And I will respond to your direct question. I've received many letters over the course of the last few days from people that I was at school with. This one I think is particularly relevant. I was a Jewish pupil at Dulwich College at the same time, and I remember him very well. While there was plenty of macho, tongue-in-cheek schoolboy banter, it was humour. And yes, sometimes it was offensive, rather like most of the BBC's output, but never with malice. I never heard him racially abuse anyone. If he had, he would have been reported and punished. He wasn't. The news stories are without evidence except for belatedly politically dubious recollections from nearly half a century ago. Back in the 1970s, the culture was very different. Perhaps, Damon, you should reflect on that. Especially at Dulwich. Lots of boys said things they'd regret today, or just laugh at. Whilst Nigel stood out, he was neither aggressive nor a racist. If I can help in any way, let me know. And I've had plenty of those messages over the course of the last few days, and I'm sick to death of the double standards and hypocrisy, above all, of your organisation. And what happened on the Today programme this morning was a complete bloody disgrace. Next, Sam Coates from Sky News. No, I'm done with you, thank you.
My question was, he said they were lying. I mean, it sounds like
Sam Coates from Sky. I'm really, until you apologise for all of your output, your appalling output, at the same time that I'm accused of saying these things which I deny, I'm not speaking to you. All right? Sam Coates, Sky News.
Nigel Farage.
Yes.
£9 million is a whopping donation, and if it was given to another party, you'd expect quite a lot of transparency around it. So,
sorry,
can you tell us how often do you speak to Christopher Harbour? What do you talk about? What do you think he wants from a reformed UK government? And if he loves Britain so much, why does he spend so long in Thailand?
Because that's where he's been based for some of his business activities for many, many years. As you know, Sam, because you're better researched than the BBC on some things, he has a global business. He's got business interests in all the continents of the world. His natural home is here. His donation is nothing out of the blue. It's nothing new. I mean, after all, he gave a significant amount of money. He was a dedicated Brexiteer. He gave a significant amount of money to the Brexit Party at the time, starting off with the European elections in 2019. And, you know, I think what he wants to do, really, is to try and help us get onto a level playing field with the trade union-funded Labour Party and a Conservative Party where there seems to be a remarkable correlation, I can't think why, between donations and membership of the House of Lords. So I think that what Mr. Harbour is trying to do is get us onto a level playing field. Yes, it is a very big donation, but I mean, bear in mind, you know, that the Labour Party, literally on the eve of the election in 24, took £4 million from a tax haven-based hedge fund with shares in oil and the arms industry. So perhaps it's not quite as unusual as you think. And does he want, hang on, does he want anything from me? No. Absolutely nothing in return at all. He just happens to think that we've not made the most of Brexit, that we're not getting into the 21st century technologies, and for all the talk about data centres, for all the talk about AI, for all the talk, well, at least from us at least, not the others, about crypto, you know, we cannot do this without the most massive re-evaluation of what is currently a catastrophic energy policy. Does he want anything in return for his money? I promise you, absolutely nothing. Do I speak to him regularly? Maybe once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks, but certainly not more than that. And have I promised him anything? Hand on heart, I have not promised him a single thing in return for his donation. Thank you. Can we go on to Catherine Foster at GB News?
Thank you, Catherine Forster, GB News.
Microphones everywhere.
Try that again. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Yeah.
You've accused the government of committing electoral fraud, but they say that they're just trying to devolve powers back to local communities.
Oh, yes.
Don't they have a point? And also, the inquiry onto the Dawn Sturgis murder has found that Putin is morally responsible. Is that your view too? Because at the time that the Skripals were still in hospital, didn't you say that the then government had jumped the gun in blaming Russia? Thank you.
I didn't know what had happened. There was a poisoning. Do I think Putin's a monster? I think he proves that with every single week that goes by. I think, my friend Donald Trump genuinely thought he could somehow get the Ukrainians, the Russian leaders together and forge some kind of sensible compromise to end the sort of scale of killing we've not seen on a battlefield since probably World War I, or maybe Stalingrad, going on in Europe. And Putin proves with every week that goes by that he's not rational, that he doesn't want a just settlement, and that frankly he is an incredibly dangerous man. So of that there is absolutely no doubt. And by the way, this makes me laugh with this mob that we pay money to every year, and others. I'm pro-Putin because I once said in 2013 I admired him as a leader but disliked him as a human being and wouldn't live in the Soviet Union. Shortly after, and I'm a Russian asset apparently according to Starmer for doing that. A year after that, the Queen met him. Whether she was a Russian asset, I'm not entirely sure. So that's that. In terms of devolution, well, the definition of devolution, of course, is passing power from central government down so that decision-making is nearer the people. Tangerine District Council, which has 2 parliamentary constituencies in it, is geographically right out on the eastern front of Essex. It's quite tough to get to by road and by rail, but it does have an identifiable district council, one that arguably, indeed Peter Harris was leader of it a couple of years ago, one that arguably has been better led than many councils in the country, that is not saddled with a great degree of debt, and they will be giving all their powers away and up to a higher amorphous unitary, probably based in Colchester, but we don't know, Peter, where it's going to be based or what it's going to be. And the county of Essex will be divided up into 3, 4 or 5 separate unitaries. So I just don't buy this. And very interestingly, Bob Russell, who was the Lib Dem Member of Parliament for Colchester for many years, he and I have been at one on this, and it's nice to agree with them occasionally on something. And he says, well, back in 1973 was the last major government reorganisation, but nobody cancelled elections of any kind. They actually held elections to see what the electorate thought of what the proposed changes were. And that argument now seems to be out of the window. So I just don't buy devolution in every sense, because district councils are handing powers up to unitaries. And I think the upshot of this will be that the smaller rural communities around our country will find themselves increasingly governed by decisions made by cities or major towns and big population centres. And I think, given, frankly, the assault that this government has launched on our rural communities, this will go down very, very badly indeed. Harry Horton, ITV News.
Thank you very much. I've spoken to a lot of people from Dulwich
Good for
College.
you. Let's move on to the Times,
Stefan
shall we?
Baranok. He says he can remember you
very good
making hissing noises
very
towards
good.
Peter Attention.
Harry, you are wasting your time. Bernard Manning. Bernard Manning. Bernard Manning. Do you want to hear some of the Bernard Manning jokes on ITV?
These are pretty serious allegations.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. Very good. Very good.
And joking about how Hitler should have desk him.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Do you,
I'm sure.
like your deputy leader,
I'm sure.
think these allegations are also made of?
Shall I reread this letter to you? Shall I reread this letter to you? There was plenty of macho, tongue-in-cheek schoolboy banter when I was there with Farage. I was a Jewish pupil. It was humour, sometimes offensive, but never with malice. And I'm just frankly, Harry, as I say, you were the channel of Bernard Manning. He occasionally appeared on the Beeb. Your channel, at the same time that I'm accused of saying this, which I deny in any malicious or nasty way, at the same time as that, you every single week had homophobic content, you had racist content, you had all sorts of content which these days you'd be locked up for. So let's cut the double standards from British broadcasters, shall we? I've made it as clear as I'm going to. Max Kendix on the Times.
To change election rules to stop donations by crypto. Do you think that's specifically an attack on you and your party, especially considering the donor who is a big crypto investor? And I wonder, you read out one letter there and you said you had others.
Yeah.
How many of your former pupils have written to you?
I've had half a dozen letters from people I was at school with. There may be more in the email system somewhere. I don't know. I've had other letters from school which I'm just not going to make public because you'll chase after them and make their lives a misery. So I shan't do that. Look, we are the only political party that even understands the 21st century revolution that cryptocurrencies are. We've already published our white paper for what we do to make London a centre for crypto trading. I have been to meet the Governor of the Bank of England, whose attitude towards stablecoins frankly belongs, well, not even to the 20th century, but way back to the 19th century. There are currently 7 million holders of digital assets in this country. That is, in fact, I think that may actually have gone up since the 7 million. It'll be 10 million within the year. 1 in 4 under 30s have confidence in digital assets, and yet the Conservative and Labour parties literally don't understand what we're even talking about. And we are being left behind on AI, being left behind on data centers, being left behind on crypto, massively behind on robotics. I mean, to a level you can't even believe. And we are the only party that actually gets this, understands this, wants to embrace this. But we're being resisted by the Bank of England, we're being resisted by the FCA, we're being resisted by the Labour Party, resisted by the Conservative Party. But I think we're on the side of what is a major, major attitudinal change to money, and dare I say it, sovereignty at an individual level. And as one that was famously debanked and have now recently been de-accounted and de-insured and de-pension platformed, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. So we're the first political party to say, yes, of course, you can donate to us in crypto. And I think the statement that the Labour Party have made on this is aimed directly at us. And goodness knows what other horrors the elections bill will have when it's published at some point. This government has no respect for liberty, freedom or democracy whatsoever. And they're doing everything they can to save their own skins. But we absolutely believe that cryptocurrencies are a vital part of our economic future, both for Britain and for the free world, and for individuals who want to have control over their own money, where government or banks acting under political influence can't damage their lives. And I say that personally with a very, very high degree of passion. Jack Elsom from The Sun, who broke this story last night.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. Just from your answer to the BBC, you said until you apologise, I'm not speaking to you. Is this an official reform boycott of the BBC until they apologise?
I'm too busy to speak to them.
But are you boycotting them
I'm,
they apologise now?
I'm too busy to speak to them.
Okay.
Their double standards are absolutely contemptuous. I've had enough.
And then
You might think, yeah, I mean, you might say I actually mean that.
you ruled out a pact with the Conservatives, and instead said that anything would be some sort of engineering of a reverse takeover. But at what point, when you accept so many former Conservatives into your rank, do you become exposed to the claims that it's not them being taken over, but it's you?
Well, no, because actually we have free will, don't we? You know, I don't have to welcome the Dean Dorries into the party. I don't have to welcome in anybody into the party, certainly not into a role. So we will take people into the party who we think can add to us. And one of the points that I made at our conference back in September is, we've all got strengths and weaknesses. Our biggest weakness is a lack of experience. Richard Tice, myself, Zia, Leila Cunningham, all of our frontline people, none of them have ever actually been at the coalface of government. So we want it, and that's why Danny Kruger was really important to us, because Danny had worked inside leaders' offices and number 10 for prime ministers and as an MP for basically 20 years. You know, Danny knows more about how it works in number 10, what the interactions are with the civil service. So, you know, and the same goes at, the same goes at county level. If you get a complete set of virginal councillors walking into County Hall, you've probably got a bit of a problem. You need people with experience of politics, experience of life, experience of management, who've been there before. So look, we will not become the Conservative Party 2.0. And as far as pacts are concerned, well, I made the point, you know, that I sort of half jokingly say we might do a reverse takeover, but I think that after May next year, when you're all sitting here in a room like this, you'll have a very different view of the question you just asked. Because I think next May marks the moment when the Conservative Party, after a good run of 200 years, ceases to be a national party. They are going to be obliterated in Scotland. They are going to barely exist in Wales. And if you look at where the local councils are taking place, the counties that will now go ahead are all Conservative held. I believe we're going to do phenomenally well in those counties, as we did in the 10 that we won a clear majority in, the other 2 that we're the main party in. And you look at where thousands of council seats are being fought. Gateshead, Newcastle, Barnsley, Sandwell, Wolverhampton. I genuinely think that, you know, when we sit here on May the 8th next year, you'll all take a very different view. They will not be a national party. So the view I take, we'll see whether I'm right. That's what we're working towards. Daniel Martin from The Telegraph.
Hello, Daniel Martin from The Telegraph. You've criticised Labour's plans on trial by jury.
Yes.
Would you commit to reversing them if you get into government?
Yes.
Okay. And
yes.
then also,
it's an absolutely fundamental freedom. It is our last protection against the state. I think it's absolutely... and by the way, of course, there are flaws with the jury system. There are flaws with whatever system you come up with. But, you know, the idea of this is to cut court time. I mean, I was in court recently. Nice chap, crossed the channel, wanted to kill me, you know, normal sort of drill. And I was amazed how much hanging around there was. You know, we were due to start at a certain time. Why didn't we start? Serco might deliver the defendant late, is one of the reasons I was given. Apparently this happens almost every day. You know, and frankly, if they wanted to clear the backlog of minor cases, then I tell you what they ought to do. They ought to reopen all those magistrates' courts that have closed up and down this country. They ought to appeal to the retired lay magistrate to say, come back, help us deal with this. It's about 80,000 cases now, I think, that we're roughly backed up. You know, they should appeal to that. And frankly, there's no reason why our Crown Courts, for the slightly more serious cases, there is no reason why they can't work from 7 in the morning till 10 at night to clear this backlog and to abolish a right to devalue something called Magna Carta, which, do you know what? We're actually admired in many parts of the world for being the author of this very idea of individual liberty and freedom from a potentially overwhelming state is, I think, a very poor and frankly sick excuse. Let's go to Jonathan Walker from the Daily Express.
From what you've said, that you don't support the changes to local councils. Does that include the creation of mayors? Do you think that these mayors should not exist? And would a reform government abolish them? And would you bring back first past the post for elections?
Look, we do not have the power to stop this local government reorganisation. We don't have the power to stop the mayors being put in place in these counties. I accept that. I regret it, and I've made my point passionately, I think, about a small, quite rural district council that I happen to be one of the representatives for. But I have to be realistic. And realism says it's happening. It isn't going to change. The different architecture with police and crime commissioners and the incredible responsibility these 4 guys would have had. Incredible responsibility. So look, we're not standing here saying we're going to reverse these devolved changes. Frankly, I think our electorates are being put through enough to get to the destination. As I said earlier, elections in Clacton, 26, 27 and 28, I think our folks, frankly, will be dizzy. So we're not going to reverse it, but we will do our absolute best to try to make it work as well as it possibly can. David Lynch, Press Association.
Hi, Mr. Farage. Yeah, David Lynch from P8. Just wanted to ask you again about your 9 million donation. What due diligence is the party actually doing to make sure what is the source of that cash is all hunky-dory, basically?
Very interesting you asked that, because actually the system we put in place for cryptocurrencies would have been the most lengthy, most complex and deepest form of compliance vetting of any donors ever in British politics. And all of that have been put in place. And if you want, Max, I can send you a paper on the rules that we put in place to make sure we know the source of donations. Look, we've been through all... By the way, it's funny, one of the criticisms of us has been that we've sent back more donations than any other party. Yes, do you know why? Because we're that strict. And we know that we're going to be held to a higher standard than any other party. A little example, people sending us money from what was a holding company. You know, the Liberal Democrats years ago got away with a couple of million donation on this. When we got quite a big donation from a holding company, we sent it straight back and said we didn't believe that was within the spirit and the letter of the legislation. So I would argue that in terms of financial compliance, I genuinely think we are the hottest and the strictest of any party, and that applies to sterling donations or donations in crypto that get exchanged into sterling in. We are very, very comfortable and confident that in the case of Mr. Harborne, we know where his incomes come from. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to Tim Ross from Politico.
So, in light of the comments from Emma Barnett this morning on the Today programme, talking about your, quotes, relationship with Hitler.
Yeah, lovely, wasn't it? Charming. It's what I pay my licence fee for, after all.
If that's not true, will you and your lawyers be considering legal action against the BBC on defamation grounds on that? And then very quickly for our international readers, I just wondered, obviously you said Putin doesn't want a just settlement in Ukraine. Will you be advising your friend, the President of the United States, to do everything he can to help Ukraine win on the battlefield now and change course?
Okay, that's a big question. In terms of legal action, there's one legal action I wasn't necessarily going to say this, but you teased it out of me. You say and say. The one legal action that we're going to consider tonight, but I've not yet had proper time to look at it, is whether we can go to judicial review to make these mayoral elections go ahead. That is something I'll be looking at tonight, and I can't really give you a firm opinion on it now, only to say that we have talked to our lawyers briefly before we came in this room, and we're considering that. When it comes to generally fighting libel actions, defamation actions, I have fought them in the past. I've never lost one. I haven't fought very many, but my experience is they take up a huge amount of your emotional capital, your financial capital. You almost become obsessed with the case, and you live, breathe, and sleep it to the detriment of virtually everything else. What is clear is that, I think I said it already to one of the earlier questions, I think that Putin is not looking for any sense of a fair and equitable deal, and I made it clear at the weekend that you know, you could argue that the limits of size put on the Ukrainian army are bigger than they ever would have been in peacetime. Yeah, you could argue that, but equally it's making a demand on Ukrainian sovereignty, and generally the only people that accept limitations on the size of their army, their air force or their navy are people who've signed unconditional surrenders. So on a point of sovereignty principle, I don't find that acceptable. And, you know, look, of course there are arguments about Russian-speaking areas, there are arguments about what might have happened over the course of the last 20 years, 100 years, you know, all of that's complicated. But I don't think I don't think that Zelensky, and who knows how long he's going to last, because we've always known that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, but he's shown personal bravery. How can Zelensky give up territory that they've lost tens of thousands of lives defending? So the deal as it is at the moment doesn't work and can't stand. But look, can I be clear? That is not an anti-Trump comment. I admire Donald Trump for trying damned hard to find a peace settlement. And what he's achieved in the Middle East, I think, is greater than any American president has achieved in half a century. And Trump's strength is that he is by nature a peacemaker, not a warmonger, like most of the American presidents that have preceded him in the previous quarter of a century. Some would argue his desperation for peace is perhaps a weakness as well. You can view it how you want, but he's always been very, very determined to use this second presidency to try and use American might and muscle, and forget the tariff arguments, they're about money, but to try and achieve peace in the world if he can. And I admire him hugely for it, and I know how frustrated he's been by Putin's lack of rationality. Aggie Chambers from LBC. Chambers, sorry.
Aggie Shamberg from LBC. Can I just check what you meant in your responses to Damien Grammaticus and Harry Horton? Because it seemed like you were suggesting that the alleged comments should be placed in the context of time. Do you agree now that comments like that would be unacceptable now? Are you trying to suggest they weren't acceptable then? And there's lots of Tories that obviously you wouldn't want in Reform UK, but would you be interested in having Robert Jenrick by your side?
That's a really good question. Well done. Look, back in the 1970s, the culture was very different, especially at Dulwich. Lots of boys said lots of things they'd regret today or simply just laugh at. And the double standards from the BBC this morning were wholly unacceptable. Now, the Jenrick question cropped up in an article in the Times that popped up, to my surprise, last night, which basically said that people within Reform were advising me that I should reach out to Robert Jenrick. And I get people in Reform urging and advising me every day to reach out to sporting figures, to reach out to business figures, to reach out to media figures, to reach out to political figures. And have one or two suggested I should reach out to Jenrick? Yes, they have, because they believe that his conversion from being the Remainer Robert Jenrick to being what he is today is a genuine one. And I don't know, but if it is a genuine one, I'd be more than happy to talk to him. Okay. Right, we've got a couple more to go through. Lucy Dunn from The Spectator.
Hi, Nigel. You talked earlier about the need for nominated figures in devolved areas helping people turn out and vote. So, in that case, why won't you choose and announce leaders of the Welsh and Scottish Reform parties ahead of the Holyrood and Senate election? Are you worried about being overshadowed, perhaps? And just as if I may,
please.
if I may,
Please.
Reform has received obviously a very big donation. What are you going to spend the money on?
You clearly think I'm some sort of narcissistic loon, who won't allow anybody else in the party to have any profile at all. If you actually watch broadcast media, you'll see I rarely appear now. I'm more than happy, for Richard Tice, for Zia, Lila Cunningham, for others, David Bull, for others, to go out and appear on, TV debate programmes, phone-in radio. Sarah does quite a bit of it too. Danny a bit less so because he's behind the scenes working on, our big plan going ahead. I want as much talent in the party as possible, and I absolutely can't wait for somebody who's better looking, younger, more intelligent and more articulate than me. And when that person comes along, I will recognise it and I will know it and I'll be delighted because I can get back down the pub or do whatever else I want to do. But for the moment, I'm going to spearhead this, I'm going to lead this, and I've got 30 years of experience and nobody else in Britain knows how to start and build a political party from scratch. If Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana had come to me, things might have been very different for their organisation. I'm in Scotland on Saturday, and I think there'll be a story or two that your magazine will want to cover. Midday, Saturday, Falkirk, McDonald Hotel. See you there. Archie Earl from Unheard with 3 more.
Thank you, Mr. Farage. Former Reform MP Rupert Lowe recently appeared on American journalist Tucker Carlson's podcast.
Good for him.
Did you reject the chance to go on the podcast before he went on?
I've known Tucker for a very, very long time. I used to appear quite regularly on his Fox News show. He even once said I was his favourite foreigner. But relations between us have cooled a little in recent times. Thank you. Rowena Mason from The Guardian. Oh, play the joke or double it. Go on.
Making things up. Are you saying that they have a different interpretation of events that actually...
Recollections may vary after half a century. Thank you. Let's go on to the last one. Sophie Hutchinson from the Daily Mirror.
Sophie Hutchinson from the Mirror. So, you read the letter from your school friend.
I did.
Thank you for that, which says that you did say offensive things at school.
I say them every day.
Whether they were with malice or not, deliberately every day.
I've said offensive things today. There we are.
Will you apologise to the people for the offence you caused?
If I genuinely thought I'd hurt somebody, I would apologise, of course. I've never, ever, ever in my nature been a bully of any kind at all, and I would never wish to. And I look forward to a proper apology for homophobia, sexism and racism coming from our national broadcaster. Yes?
Mr Farage, can I ask you...
Yep, hand over. Yep. You weren't on the list.
I am on the list.
What are you on now?
What should happen, Mr Farage, to Councillor Ian Cooper, Staffordshire County Council Reform leader, who it said has posted messages racist, hurtful, abusive, profiling people like David Lammy and Sadiq Khan? What should happen to him?
I discovered this at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon. I was slightly shocked that there appeared to be a social media account which had not been declared to us, and part of vetting is people have to be honest with us and declare what social media accounts they've had. And, you know, with candidates, whether they're candidates or elected, you can deal with problems in their past, whatever they might be, personal, you name it, but you have to know what they are. So I made a snap decision at 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon that we had to go through due process. All I would say is it doesn't look very good.
Should he be suspended?
We're going through due process. All I can say is it doesn't look very good. We expect our people to be truthful with us, and if they're truthful with us, we'll be honourable towards them. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.